Hi, and welcome back to Gear Up for Giving. We're here with our second session of Live with the Giving Gurus, where you get to ask your questions about nonprofit social media to our Giving Gurus. Today, we are lucky to have Katya and Andresen from Network for Good. Katya is Chief Operating Officer of Network for Good, but she's also a really well-known speaker, blogger, and author on social media, nonprofit marketing, fundraising, and online outreach. She's been involved in training lots of different kinds of causes in effective marketing and media relations, and she's won lots of national and international awards for her. More than one.
There you go.
National and international award for her marketing materials. So we're really glad to have her today, and we would love to have you start chatting in your questions or sending them with the hashtag on Twitter, #AGC, or you can continue emailing them to gearup@casefoundation.org. I'm going to take a few minutes and let Katya just give a few thoughts about her perspective on fundraising and marketing via social media. I also want to mention she did a great blog post for us yesterday on the Case Foundation site about 6 marketing mistakes, miserable marketing mistakes. So check that out if you haven't seen it yet after the session. Katya, your opening thought?
Sure. I'll make my opening thought the one thing I hope I leave with you today. And if you remember nothing else from anything I say today, this is the kicker and what I've learned from experimenting with social media over the last couple of years. And that's the key to social media is knowing it's about the social and not the media. But by that I mean it's about people and human bonds more than it is about wires and technology. So when I'm training people in social media or I'm talking about social networking, it's very easy to feel overwhelmed by how much is out there. And I often feel overwhelmed sometimes myself. But if you step back and look at all the things that's going on and how the internet is evolving and why these forms of technology have exploded, it's about something really simple that we all understand well, which is people have a basic human need to be seen and heard and to connect with other people. That's what many of us want in life. It's one of the most important things in our psyche. And what the internet is letting us do now is to do that online. And that's what's behind Facebook. That's what's behind Twitter. That's what's behind all these things is people want to have a platform for personal expression, and they want to connect with like-minded people, or they might want to debate people who aren't like-minded. So that's what's going on online. And if you want to be really good at engaging with social media, at building communities through social media, at finding supporters through social media, you can do that well if you keep your head in that place. That it's about engaging and developing relationships with people. That means it's not about taking your marketing megaphone or your mission megaphone and broadcasting everything you think to the masses through social media. That's not what this is about. It's about going out and listening first and foremost to what people are saying, to what people care about, and then connecting to those things in a really authentic, sincere, and open way. And that's a very powerful tool when you think about it. If you can really tap into those basic human needs and tie them to your cause, and ultimately maybe even use those relationships as the basis for fundraising, that can be incredibly effective. And the last thing I'll say about that is it's hard to fundraise, especially in this economic environment. And everyone I know who works in development or communications or marketing is pretty overwhelmed all the time, particularly this past year. And try to look at social media as a way to not be alone anymore. You don't have to be the only one out there trying to get your message out in the world. You have people, you may not know who they are yet. I hope by the end of this session you'll know how to find them. But you have people who love you, who are your ardent supporters, who are champions of your cause. And they would love to talk about you. Maybe they already are doing that. But they are really good at talking about what you do to their friends and family and their circles of influence. And if you give them the freedom to do that and the tools to do that, you are unleashing a whole group of people who are helping you fundraise, market, build relationships. And that's a great thing because we can't do that job alone. And we need a lot of people out there helping us to do it, and technology helps us find those people and enables them to take conventional word of mouth and amplify it many times.
I think that's a great point. Thanks for those opening thoughts. I'm sure people will have a lot of follow-up questions about them, but I really want people to hear that social media is not something you should necessarily think of as an extra thing you have to do, but more a tool that will help you do the things you're already doing and will encourage other people to help you do your job, basically, and promote your nonprofit and fundraise for you. So it's not a burden as much as it is a blessing.
That's the right way to look at it.
So if we can look at it that way, I think we'll do well. Since one of your expertise areas is fundraising, I want to start with a question we have about fundraising. How do you use social media in addition to traditional fundraising techniques to raise money?
Okay, so I want to make 2 points here. The first point with respect to social media is don't approach social media with dollar signs in your eyes. This isn't an avenue for going out and doing a massive appeal like you might through direct mail. At the get-go, where you go out and broadcast something to many people and expect them to receive the message and send in money. You need to think of it a little bit differently. You need to think about, through the eyes of the folks that are engaging with you online, how did they come to you? What are their expectations? Did they come because they thought they were signing a petition and just want to be part of an online community? Did they come to you because they wanted to look good to other people on their Facebook page and show they were green, but really have no intention of giving money? Or are they really extremely passionate supporters of what you're doing and they're out really talking about it? You need to look at how people are behaving with respect to your nonprofit and how they came to you online to figure out, are these people that I can fundraise with? The second thing is to remember, it's not about you fundraising online necessarily. Through most of these social networks, what we see as getting traction and becoming most successful in terms of fundraising is not when the nonprofit goes out and asks for money through a social network tool, but rather when they ask their supporters to do so within their communities online. That's much more effective. And if you don't believe me, I wish I could see you all, but if I could, I would ask you to raise your hand and tell me about the last time you gave money. And I do this often when I have a live audience of people in the room with me, and I ask them to tell their stories. And without fail, the vast majority of the stories are about a friend whose mother died of cancer, and their friend is doing a walk in memory of the mother. It was someone's birthday, and they were raising money for a cause on Facebook. I don't hear a lot of people saying, oh, I got an eloquently worded mission statement from an organization and I just had to give a donation. It's usually someone we know has asked us to help. And so when you're thinking about fundraising online, particularly with respect to social networks, it's all about the messenger. You want the people who really care about your cause to do the fundraising for you. And when you make that transition of sort of command and control, I'm raising money, please give me money, to letting your supporters speak in their own voices, to speak about you, about their own personal experiences with your organization, and ask people to support your organization, people will give, not necessarily because of your organization, but because they care about that person who's asking. The messenger has almost become more important than the medium, particularly with respect to social networks.
Right, I think that's great. And I have a follow-up question actually from chat that relates to that and what we were talking about before, which is one of our viewers says, I like what you're saying about social media amplifying word of mouth. Should we be strategic in giving people talking points? And how do you do that with social media?
Right. Well, we're at only possible we can do that. Sadly, we really can't give people talking points. The key here is not to control the message, and that's a really scary thing. But I really like what Clay Shirky says about this. He wrote the book Here Comes Everyone, and I heard him speak recently, and he said, I used one of his words, which is sort of command and control mothership. The era where we can go out and control everything that's said is long gone, and you shouldn't be hesitant to engage in social media because you can't write the talking points or control the message, because, believe it or not, control was gone quite some time ago. It's gone. So there's no reason to feel anxious about it. The train left the station a very long time ago. And if you need proof of that, or you need to convince people within your organization of that, Very easy. Set up, tweet beep alerts, set up Google alerts, and you'll see all the conversations going on that you can't control. But that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing, because your talking points, believe it or not, are never going to be as good as your supporters in terms of fundraising. Why? Because your supporters are experts about how to persuade their own friends and family to do things.
Right.
They know their friends and family in a way you can't. They know what buttons to push. They know what gets people in their within their own circles of influence to do things. So you want to let them do that. And the last thing I'd say is it's just a cultural thing. Social media is about a big noisy cocktail party or a big noisy community where people are speaking to each other and engaging in a very authentic way. And when you start trying to step in and apply the conventional rules where you seek to control that or you seek to tell people what to do, that goes down very, very poorly. Just imagine yourself in a social event doing that to someone and saying, no, Kristin, actually what I think you meant to say are these 3 things. It probably wouldn't go down very well. It doesn't go down very well online. So I really urge you to stay away from that and give people the power to do that. That said, there are a lot of ways you can encourage it besides saying, why don't you say this? You can give people tools. You can say, we're trying to raise money for this specific child or this specific cause, or we're trying to plant 100 trees. Would you help us? That's fine to give people that level of direction. You might even want to give them fundraising widgets or a place to set up a fundraising page or links to your community on Facebook. That's all fine, but let them choose the words and let them choose the medium, because they know they have their own places where they hang out online, and that's where you want to be, where their community is.
And I think putting out those resources online on various social media platforms where your audience will be just helps them to be able to share those things with their audience in a way that they want to.
That's absolutely true, and it reminds me of a story actually. At Network for Good, where I work, we started a website for social networking around good causes with Kevin Bacon called 6 Degrees. And that came about because Kevin Bacon has been in so many movies that he's only 6 degrees removed from any other actor. And he actually wanted to use that 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon for social good. He was sort of mortified about it for a long time, he says, but then he realized it could be something that was channeled to do a lot of good. And one of the most successful fundraisers of all time through that was a woman named Allie Edwards, who has an autistic son. And she runs a scrapbooking blog and travels the country working on scrapbooking, has this huge community passionate around scrapbooking. And when she saw the tools, when she saw, oh, I could raise money for something related to autism, she put it on her scrapbooking blog. She went out and she raised an incredible amount of money and got hundreds and hundreds of supporters for her cause because she was given a tool that allowed her to amplify what she would naturally do, which is not only talk about scrapbooking, but mention her son, who's adorable. And she put him on her fundraising widget, and she talked about him, and she talked about why she cared. And people gave because of that. But it made her take that extra step. She had the passion, she cared about the cause, and then she had the tool. And that's really those are the ingredients for a successful fundraising effort online from a cause champion.
I think that's a great example. Let's see. One of the questions we have from email is, we are a hospice group, and I'm having a hard time figuring out how social networking tools might help us. Any ideas?
Okay, I really like that question because actually one of the causes I've worked on most of my career is palliative care and hospice. So thank you for that question. I care passionately about your cause, and I could probably go out and do some evangelizing for you online because I do care about it. I think what you want to do is not worry too much about the tool. Stop and take a step back and think about hospice. And who in your community, who's your audience? Who are the people in your community who care about what you do as a hospice? I imagine you have people who are using hospice services who are very seriously or terminally ill. I imagine you have their family members who are extremely grateful for the services you're providing. I imagine they're family members of people who passed away in hospice, who have very strong and favorable feelings towards your organization. I imagine you have donors in the community, perhaps folks in the medical community who have benefited from referrals to your hospice. You want to break down all those different audiences and think about what are they looking for and what are they trying to do, and is there a social media tool that can help them do that better? that's the way you want to approach
Right.
it. When I think about hospice, I think about the incredibly supportive services it provides. It's not only the pain management for people who are in hospice, but the emotional care of the person in hospice, of their family. All of that is really powerful. And I would think that that's something that people in hospice or have experienced hospice know very well and like to talk about with others.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the more interesting things that you see online are things like caring pages, where people have someone who's ill in their family and they're putting updates on social media that everyone can follow, and so that they don't have to constantly be texting and calling everyone to say how the patient or the loved one is doing. I've seen really wonderful work by the March of Dimes, has an online community for parents of babies in the NICU who are born prematurely, talking about their experiences. And you see these wonderful dynamics happening where people who have gone through that are reaching out to other people. So again, it's about the people. Why are people passionate about hospice, and how can social media tools engage that? And then last, you may find people want to use those tools to fundraise for hospice down the road, or really care about it and want that experience for other people in your community. Put those tools that you've built in their hands, and they will do what comes naturally, which is want to spread the word about you and get support for you.
Great. I'm going to take another question from chat about Twitter, actually. It says, do Twitter followers care who our nonprofit follows on Twitter? And do they care who is following us?
Interesting. Okay, the first point I'll make about Twitter is it's about quality, not quantity. So when you're looking at followers on Twitter, and this is a point actually that Jeff Livingston made last week, I believe, and he was asked about. He has a lot more followers than I do, so I was glad he said it is about quality, not quantity. He has 10 times as many followers as I do, and I thought, yeah, right. It's about quality. But the idea is, what matters is not really how many people who are following you or how many people you're following. It's who is following you and who are you following. Are they people who are actively engaged? Are they people who are influential? Are they people who can really help you spread the word about what you're trying to do, or people you can really learn from? I've been experimenting with Twitter a very long time, and it's taken me a while to figure out who to follow, because I want to follow people who I can learn from and who have useful things for me to provide. I don't aspire to follow 20,000 people or 30,000 people. I aspire to follow people who are really useful and helpful and enrich my professional life. And so when you take that approach, it is important who you're following or who's following you, and that you want a vibrant community that really helps you advance your mission and learn and engage. But you don't need to focus too much on the actual numbers. Now, I haven't run into any instances of people who really have the time to go in and scrutinize too much who's following, but I think what happens is the active member of the community, the who is very important, because the people who are really active are posting and replying, and that's how you end up getting more followers. As you see, wow, you may have 100 followers, but you're doing great if you have 20 followers who are retweeting what you say, who are posting really interesting things about your issue that are resulting in more people following that person and ultimately building this really engaged community.
And I think, people probably care if you're following them, I would say. Like if I'm following a nonprofit and I am talking to them a lot, if I'm retweeting them, I would appreciate it probably if they followed me back. So I think pay attention to who's talking about you online, and you should, make sure you're following them, because that makes sense for you to be able to have conversations with them. But I think it's also a nice gesture. You don't want to have, you don't want to be following 0 people or 5 people, because that shows that you don't really care about having conversations. It shows that, maybe you just want to be an RSS feed where you're pushing out your press releases on Twitter, and people don't really, people see through that. And I think people want to have conversations. And so if you follow people who are talking about you and the cause you care about, then that shows that, you're willing to engage in conversation with them.
I couldn't agree more. That's a really important point I neglected to make. And it gets to the heart at one of the most crucial things you need to do with social media is really value it as a listening tool. And if someone is actively following you or as a donor, really cares about your cause, you do want to be following them, because one of the most powerful things about social media is, again, it's not about getting your message out, it's about engaging and learning. And you can learn an enormous amount by listening to the people out there. And they don't like it when you don't listen, because remember, they're online to be seen and heard and connect. And if you're not listening, you're not seeing, hearing, and connecting, and people don't appreciate that at all. So yes, absolutely. Don't forget to listen. Don't forget to follow others.
I'm going to take another question from our email, which is going back to the fundraising and the tools. Is there a social media tool that's best for fundraising?
No. That's the short answer. I get a lot of questions about which, should I be on LinkedIn? Should I be on Facebook? Should I be fundraising on Facebook? Should I be fundraising? I don't know, because I don't know who your audience is, where they are, and what their expectations are. And that's where you really have to start. You need to sort out where your supporters are. So the first step to doing that is to listen. And you want to set up very simple things. Google Alerts, for example, or TweetBeat, which will send you emails when folks are talking about your cause or you or whatever, sending people to your website on Twitter. You can set up a few listening posts. And what you'll start to learn is where people are online. Then you can start to get a handle on, oh, people are congregating there. That might be a good place for me to fundraise. But again, don't start with the fundraising, start with the relationship building. So the right answer is always, it's where your audience is, and it's where your audience is engaged and would be interested in supporting you with financial gifts. So don't get too excited with the actual tool. Remember, it's about the people.
Great. And I just also want to follow up on, you mentioned fundraising widgets.
Yes.
I think not everyone knows much about widgets, how they work, what they are. Could you talk a little bit more about widgets and when people should be using them and how?
Okay. So, and I think a technology person might dispute this analogy, but it works for me. A widget is like a little suitcase. It enables you to take content or information from one place online to another. It makes things portable. And in the suitcase is code. And don't ask me to get very much into code, because I know only the basics about it. But if you do things like set up a little box on one of your home pages that has your local weather or stock tips, those are all widgets. They are giving you information that comes from another source online. So a fundraising widget, all that is something that enables you in a portable way. You can post, it's a little bit of code that you can post anywhere you want. You can post it on a Facebook page, for example, if it's built to do that. You could post it on your blog. You can send a link to it via email sometimes, depending on how it's built. But the idea is it's something that allows you to ask for money anywhere online. It makes giving portable. And that's really important, because the days of hoping that everyone will come to our website to give are gone. And people really want to give wherever they are thinking about a cause, or wherever they're engaged with it, or wherever they're doing their normal business online or talking to their friends online. And this is a really important thing for fundraisers to realize, is this is a big shift. We can't expect everyone to come to us in order to give money. And the beauty of a widget is it's the piece of technology that lets us make that portable, that makes giving an experience in anything you're doing online. So the fundraising widgets, for example, that the one Allie Edwards had that I talked about with respect to 6 Degrees, that particular widget, you could upload a photo. You could upload your own text about why you cared about a cause, and it would generate a widget. The Case Foundation's done an incredible amount of work with all kinds of folks who have widgets. Global Giving has widgets. On Facebook, obviously, you can use all kinds of different widgets to raise money, and Causes on Facebook has their own different widgets. So, but the key here, the important piece to remember, is not necessarily how they work, but that they make giving portable. They make fundraising a part of many experiences online, particularly among friends and family, which is really the key here. So you can insert your fundraising or cause into that personal relationship. That's a very powerful thing.
Great. Thanks for fleshing that out a little bit. I got another email, which I thought was an interesting question, from Nora at the Queens Museum of Art. She said, this year, in lieu of our traditional gala, we held a virtual non-gala online, in which we integrated Facebook and Twitter. It was actually very successful, and we reached our goal. Next year, we'll go back to the traditional sit-down gala, but would like to somehow still engage people with social media and have a way for people who can't afford the $300 ticket to remain involved?
Okay.
How do you integrate that?
Well, I'm really glad that it's Nora asked that question, because this is really important, actually. One of the things that I hear a lot is that people who give or engage on social networks aren't as committed as people who give through a website or show up at a gala. And, you know, they don't come back and give as much or support as much. And actually, I'm analyzing some of those numbers right now for an article I'm writing. That is somewhat true. But one of the things that we should think about there is how much of that is the nature of the donor and how much of that is the nature of how we engage with them after they did that act online.
Right.
So I've given to a lot of causes online and via Facebook, etc. And I've only had one ever thank me through Facebook. I've had one only ever persist in giving me updates through Facebook. And I find that we sort of forget that we need to cultivate people with remembering how they came to us. So I think it's wonderful she had that event. And I think it's appropriate for her to let the folks know that there is a gala this year. But it would be a big problem not to give those folks an opportunity to have a virtual event again or to acknowledge what they did last time. So I'd ask a couple questions. Number one, what did you do after that event? Have you been writing everyone over the course of the year to thank them for participating in the virtual event? Have you been cultivating them? Have you talked about the social good that has resulted because of your event? If you haven't done those things, do that quickly before you invite them to another event, because cultivation is key here. It's not about treating someone like an ATM machine or only calling them when we need them. People don't appreciate that. Again, it's about relationships. So that's step one, is make sure you've done a really good job thanking them for last time. Second one is to really engage with them, talk to some of them, talk to people who are particularly active and the sort of the leaders in this initiative last year, and ask them what they would like to do this year. Would they like to continue the event? How are ways they'd like to support you? I wouldn't try to force them all into showing up at the gala. I would respect how they first engage with you and ask them, you know, what would you like to do this year? Because then the wonderful thing is you can go back to that community and say, hey, you know, we told you about all the good that resulted, and you told us you'd like to do it again this year. And you could turn the people who are enthusiastic about it into the folks that lead the effort this year. Remember, you don't have to do all the work. If they were really engaged and they like doing things online and spreading the word online, by all means, let them do that again. And third, I'm glad you're thinking about offline and online together. That's wonderful, and you need to keep doing that. So you're genius, Nora, you're way ahead of the curve there, because most people are still thinking about all this stuff in silos. They're thinking, okay, well, we have our online givers, we have our direct mail folks, we have the folks who come to our gala. And they don't do things like ask people at the gala for their email address if they'd like email updates. You know, sometimes people who gave online want direct mail. And you need to think about how all these things work together. One doesn't replace the other. Hopefully they work together, and people don't necessarily stay in neat categories. So by all means, invite some of those people to the gala. They might really want to engage with you in person, but also give them other means to do so.
Do you have any thoughts on what examples might be? I know sometimes at events people have a Twitter feed kind of up on the screen so that people who are at the event can interact with people who are not at the event, which you can do pretty easily with a projector and a laptop.
I think that would be a great idea to make the virtual participants very visible at the event. That's a great suggestion. But remember, it works two ways, and the people who are at the event might want to engage with you afterwards virtually. And one of the things I have ranted about on my blog before is how many events I've gone to that are incredibly powerful, and someone will get up and give an amazing speech, and you'll feel so moved. And then there's no call to action. There's nothing to do. And you sort of get weepy over your chicken dinner, but then you go home and no one's asked you for anything. So I would try to get it to work both ways. I would get the virtual participants to have a visible presence at the real event, and then get the people at the real event to carry on the momentum from that event online. Engage with those other folks. Because both the online, and there is some overlap there, they all have something in common, which is they care passionately about what you do, and you want them to be connected to each other.
Great. I'm going to take 1 second, since we're about halfway through, to remind everyone to take the survey on I guess it's the right-hand side. I'm trying to think which side of the screen. It's on the right-hand side. There's just a brief survey to let us know how we're doing with these sessions and how they could be a little more helpful to you in the future, since we will be here every Tuesday and Thursday for the next month or so at 1 p.m. Eastern. So you should take the survey, and you also have an opportunity to win a flip cam and a $250 gift card for your favorite nonprofit. So it's just a small thing that could be great. And then also wanted to remind you that if you have to drop off or if you've missed the beginning of the session, we are recording this and we'll have it on our website this afternoon. We're also going to have a transcript so you can search for specific questions or keywords afterwards, and that'll take a couple of days. So just wanted to plug in those reminders. And I have another question from Twitter, which I think is a great question that I hear people talking about a lot. We've actually had some conversation about it on Social Citizens, which is how to find the balance between personal and business related tweets. But I think that also can go to how do you find the balance between the professional and the personal on Facebook, and how do you find it on your blog, and all of these different things, because
well, if there's anyone out there who's figured out the ideal work-life balance, please email me after this. I think it's always a struggle to find that balance. But I think the short answer there is everything personal is business and everything business is personal online now. The lines are really, really blurred. And you may think I use Facebook for personal things and I have a professional Twitter identity, for example, but those barriers don't really hold very well. I can tell you a couple examples. We were just chatting in here before we got started today about how I did a guest blog post recently for The Port, which has great resources on social media, and they used my Facebook photo, which was fine, but it's a picture of my children at Halloween, and it hadn't occurred to me that, well, of course someone could go on and I'm friends with them on Facebook and pull the photo. So I think a couple things here. One is you want to think about social media as rather blurred there. And that means it's very helpful when you're thinking about your organization to have some ground rules. And often ground rules get made up very quickly after the fact when something goes awry or someone posts something inappropriate or someone goes and comments on a blog in a way that is defensive or not the way you want the organization represented. They may think they were doing that as an individual, but as we all know, those lines are blurred. So the first thing is, let's recognize the lines are blurred and then come up with some policies around that. So we have a social media policy at Network for Good that we worked on. We did not invent that from scratch. Beth Cantor has done a lot of great work with that. She has some resources on that, as does Nancy Schwartz. Those are people who have big online presence. You can just Google them and find their
Beth
resources.
Beth is also one of our gurus, so we'll jot that question
She's indeed
down
a
to
guru.
ask her again.
But our social media policy really spells out, when is it, what can you do personally? Just keep in mind, people know you professionally as well, and you want to be cautious about what you're putting on your Facebook page, etc. We're very clear about when people are posting as individuals versus posting as a representative of the organization. You want to be really clear and authentic about when you are a representative of your organization. This is key. I know that Click Daily talked about astroturfing and sock puppeting. I've had people do that on my blog. I don't like it, but that's when you get on and comment and pretend to be someone else, or don't show that you have some self-interest here, you're representative of the organization. That's not a bad thing, that you're out there listening. You need to be honest about that. So the overall point there is you want some ground rules. The second piece is, don't be afraid if you're doing things like blogging, if you're doing things like tweeting, to have some personality in that, even if it's a primarily professional function or extension of your organization. At heart, social media, as I've said repeatedly, is about people, and it's about authenticity. So you don't want to sound like a robot or that you're spewing talking points or just putting press releases online in your blog. No one will read it. It's really boring. And no one will want to follow you on Twitter if you're just talking about yourself or putting very official things on there. So it's okay to be a little more relaxed, a little more human, and to remember that you're connecting with people out there, so you want to talk as an individual. And I can tell you that really pays off. When the people you see with incredible followings online, like I'm thinking of, for example, the Zappos CEO and others who do amazing work on Twitter, but I tweeted something positive about Zappos, and he started following me, to your earlier point, and writing me. But he's not just a CEO, he's a person on there, and that's a really good thing. And when I've, on my blog, talked about something personal, or I've used my children as an example of something, I get this outpouring of comments, and I'm always struck by the more human you are, and the more you make clear that you're talking honestly and authentically and sincerely, the more people are going to want to engage with you.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I totally feel the same way about the people that I follow on Twitter. The people I enjoy the most are people like the Zappos CEO who, you know, he's representing a brand and he does talk about work and shoes, but he is clearly a person who has a personality, and that's what makes it interesting to follow him. So I try to encourage people to let some of their personality show through, and no, you know, no one wants to know what you're eating for lunch.
Right.
You don't have to be that detailed, but if there are interesting things that have nothing to do with work, I think it's fine to share them as well. I think this also touches on another issue similar. People often ask, should I have an organizational, like a logo where I have you know, the Case Foundation Twitter feed, or should I be myself, or should I do both? And you know, should all of the employees have their own Twitter feeds, or how should we coordinate that?
Well, I think again, it depends on your goals and what you're trying to do online and where you are online. That's primarily it. But I think you often end up with a combination.
Right.
So, and I think the Case Foundation has a combination as well. I know I get things from the Case Foundation. I see things about you and others from the Case Foundation, and I appreciate and like that. We do the same thing at Network for Good. We have a fundraising TWIP, which is sort of fundraising tips for nonprofits. It has a Network for Good logo, but I tweet, and other people who work at Network for Good are on Twitter, and I think a combination works really well. And again, because there's some people who come for us and they just want a fundraising tip every day. And that's great. And maybe someone just wants to hear about Case Foundation happenings, and they can follow that tweet. That's great. Then they may be people who are genuinely interested in areas that different folks here are focusing on, and are interested in those areas of specialties that staff here have, as well as maybe what they're up to, or what interesting observations they have about what's going on in the world. And you want to have those people be able to have a community too. You know, in life, we often want, you know, we often see different versions of messaging going out there, and different editions of traditional media. It's the same thing here. You probably want some personal editions and a professional edition.
Great. I have another follow-up question from our chat, which is, I work for a youth development nonprofit, and we were concerned about following people on Twitter because we don't want to endorse their message if it's against our mission. What should we do?
Well, I think that on Twitter, culturally, it's understood you don't necessarily endorse the people that you follow. You're interested in engaging and conversing with them. So I wouldn't get overly concerned about it. That said, you want to be careful that you're not following someone who's offensive, who's saying things that are destructive, who's not a constructive member of the community, who perhaps, you know, does things that isolate or you know, turn off a lot of people in your community, like using profanity or being insulting. So there's some common sense rules there. Folks like that, you might want to stop following, or you might want to defriend on Facebook. By the way, you know, the person doesn't get an email if you do that. So you can't do that. They may notice they're not in your community, but probably not. So you shouldn't be afraid to do that. But in general, I think if you only follow, or you only engage with people who are like-minded and in lockstep with you, that really runs counter to culturally what is going on with social media, the aim of social media, which is really a listening and engagement tool. If you're only engaged with people who think the exact same way as you do, it's not as interesting, it's not as rich, and it's certainly not as sincere or authentic.
That's great. And then I'm going to take another question from email, which is from a person who says they're struggling to find partnerships aside from Rotary clubs in their area that will provide them with sustainable funds. How can we reach this community of funders? So I guess it's about how do you reach new communities beyond
new partners
who your funders have been?
Okay.
And how can social media help with that?
Okay, that's a great, good fundraising question. So when you're thinking about partners, and I'm going to get away from individual donors here for a second, because we are talking about Rotary Club, which is sort of more of a less of an individual donor. And what you want to think about with partners is who wins when we win. The ideal partnership shares a similar audience. There's some overlap in the people that you're trying to reach. So if it's a company, the people that the company is marketing to overlap with your donors or maybe your constituents. That's a good thing. If you're trying to reach the same audience, and if the actions that you both want the audience to take are complementary to both of you, then that is going to be a long-lasting winning partnership. We have a lot of what I like to call kumbaya partnerships, where we all sort of hold hands in a circle and say we're partners, but there's really no substance to it, other than you share logos on your sites or materials. That's a lot of effort for no gain. What you want to look at is who in your community really benefits from the work you do, and think really creatively about that. And those are the sort of low-hanging fruit, or the best prospects you have to go after. Then when you start to go after a major donor or a partner, what you want to do is not talk about what you need from them, but about what you can do for them. And that's a really big shift. I was at Independent Sector last year, the big conference, and I heard the head of the Walmart Foundation talking about how frustrating it was that most nonprofit organizations came to them, just wanting a big check. And that very few had taken the time to look at Walmart's philanthropic agenda, its priorities, as well as its business realities. Corporations have business priorities and philanthropic priorities. They already have both. And you want to really listen to those and ask about those and talk about how supporting your organization is something that allows them to extend their business, their impact in the community, that it's a win-win. Same thing with a major donor. You want to look at what does this person care about? What's interesting to them? How can I tie into that? Why is my cause relevant to them? The best mantra I can give you when trying to find new partners or expanding your funding is, don't tell people to value your cause. Show how your cause relates to their existing values. And the last piece I'll give you is the 4 questions you need to answer to get anyone to give money. These are good. And these apply online media with individual donors. They apply with social media, and I'll get to the social media part of your question in a second, but they also apply to offline fundraising. The first question that you need to answer for a prospective donor is, why me? Why should I care about this? This is what I'm trying to get at about listening first and connecting. That is key. That's how you get someone's attention. You won't get their attention if you don't start there with their perspective. The second thing is, what for? Why should I support you? If I give you money, what's going to happen? What's going to happen for me? So if you fill out the survey, as Kristin pointed out, you might get an iPod. Sorry, no, what's on an iPod is a flip video.
Not an iPod.
You get a flip video. But that's an example of what for. Why should I fill out the survey? Right. That's what for. You could give someone a coffee mug. But also what for. Who's going to benefit in the community? What amazing stories can you tell about the social impact you'll have if someone supports you? That's more and more important because donors are really skeptical these days. They aren't sure where their money's going to go. We need to talk tangibly about the social change we're going to achieve because these people are supporting us. So that's the second question. Third question is, why now? To get anyone to do something, you need to instill a sense of urgency in your ask. And I can tell you with online behavior and social media behavior, we see giving urgency most naturally coming in 3 cases. One is in the event of a massive natural disaster. You see an incredible upsurge in online activity and giving because there are human lives at stake. People want to do something right away. Another one is in December. People want to give because it's the end of the tax year. The 2 biggest online giving days are December 30th and 31st. And right up to midnight on the 31st. Generous procrastinators, we call those folks. But another way to instill urgency is to have matching gifts, to set a campaign goal. The third category is when someone we know asks us for money. There's a real sense of urgency there. If it's Kristin's birthday and she asks me for money, I'm probably going to give money by the time her birthday rolls around because I feel a sense of urgency around that. And the last question you want to answer is, who says? Who is talking about this message? Who is telling me this is a worthy organization? This is really key. There's all kinds of fascinating social psychology about third-party endorsement, but we always believe people we know more than we believe institutions, organizations, foundations, etc. Right. The last time you took a trip, I bet you scrutinized, TripAdvisor, or before you went to a restaurant, you looked at Yelp. More than you studied the official restaurant website or more than you believed the pictures on the hotel's website. That's because we look to people we trust. So the person delivering the message, as I said earlier, is as important as the message. So to get someone to give money, ideally a trusted messenger is the one talking. And that trusted messenger could be one of your supporters, but it could also be someone who benefited from your programs. Some of the best fundraising I've seen are people who have been helped by a program talking about the impact that had on their lives. Your volunteers can be amazing spokespeople. And I often get comments about, well, we can't put the children we help out there because of anonymity and that kind of thing. We can certainly put parents on there. You can certainly put the folks that helped the children, the frontlines people at your organization out there telling their stories. That's really effective. So, sorry for the long answer, but then the last point here is, you asked about social media and expanding into social media. There you're going to want to listen. You're going to want to figure out where people are congregating. And then when you are ready to make a fundraising ask with folks who are online and around social media, you are going to want to be sure that those 4 questions are answered and have those first and foremost in your mind to get that conversion to a gift.
That's great. Thanks for that. That's a lot of great information. No, it's great. And I think I want to highlight also the storytelling element. People talk a lot about the effectiveness of storytelling in advocacy for your organization as well as fundraising, and how people have great stories to tell, both people who've been helped by your organization, volunteers, and social media can be a great way to allow people to tell their stories.
That's absolutely right. And I have 2 fabulous examples of that I like to point people to around homelessness, which, you know, what new under the sun on homelessness? You know, we've all heard about homelessness. There's some people doing amazing work with homelessness with social media tools right now. One of my favorite ones is Invisible People TV. Mark Horvath is someone who was formerly homeless himself. He travels around the country interviewing homeless people. And I have to say, after watching these videos with homeless people telling their stories, I look at the issue completely differently. It's transformed my understanding of homelessness and how it can happen to anyone. And the stories that you see on there are incredible, and I've become an advocate on that issue that I never was before, because of what he's done with Flip Video and that kind of thing. Amazing. Second one is, I don't know if you all noticed over the weekend, but there's a woman who became an instant celebrity who had become homeless. She lost her job. She'd hung on for a while. Then she moved into a camper and was living in a Walmart parking lot. And she started a blog called Girl's Guide to Homelessness. And she just started blogging about how she was surviving living in a camper in a parking lot and all the things she was contending with. She was a gifted writer and a very authentic messenger. And next thing you know it, she's on TV stations from New Zealand, she's on CNN, and Elle magazine has made her a contributor on their blog. But that's an example of the amazing power of story. And authentic messenger. And so if you're feeling like the well is dry and you are just don't know what to put in your appeals, or you're really stuck with what to use in your online outreach, go to people like that, because their stories are so moving and so effective. And as you rightfully point out, social media lets us spread those stories far and wide, really economically and really effectively.
It's true. Those are great examples. I hadn't seen the second one, but Mark, I've seen some of those as well, and they're really, really moving. So
I've got her up on my blog.
Oh yeah,
yes.
I'll check that out.
The homeless blogger. Yeah, she's terrific.
Interesting. Another question we've gotten several times, and I kind of asked Jeff this question last week, but since we get it so often and people have different opinions about it, obviously, I'd like to ask you as well. With limited time, everyone knows people who work at nonprofits, it's already a lean staff and people are working really hard and not being paid a whole lot, and sometimes it's volunteer staff. And so how do you make the most of the resources you have? Are there a couple of social media tools? This is what people often ask, what's the one, or what are the 2 social media tools I should be using to reach the most people?
Okay. So I think that you do want to limit yourself to a couple tools, particularly if you're just getting started, because it's easy to become inundated and overwhelmed and to spread yourself too thin. Like, it's bad to set up Twitter and not tweet once a month, or to start a blog and never post on it, or to set up a Facebook page and have no one join it because you really aren't trying. So you don't want to do that. It's almost worse. It's like having a party that no one shows up for. So you want to focus on a couple things that you do have the time to do. And you know what? If you have time to do none of them, then at least set up a Google Alert, Tweet Beat. Just listen. Just start somewhere. But try, do that as a first step. If you have a little bit of time, set up a couple things you can do well. Which are the best ones? Again, I wish I had, the silver bullet secret answer there. It depends where your audience is. If you're trying to reach really young people, Twitter might not be the best place. If you're trying to reach people who are 60 plus, some of them are active on social networks, but it's not necessarily going to be some of the ones you might want to target if you're going after 20 to 30-year-olds. So you need to think about, who am I trying to reach and what am I trying to get them to do? Why am I engaging in this? And then, and only then, answer, okay, then you know what? It really makes sense for me to look at Facebook, or really makes sense for me to look at a blog for someone within my organization. But find a couple things that you can do really well. That's the first thing. Second thing is, try to organize yourself. And there are some technology tools that Jeff talked about last week that can help you stop the madness. So there are about 50 blogs I try to follow. I do not go to all those bloggers' websites. I have them in my Google Reader. There's TweetDeck. There are different things that can help you organize and filter. On Facebook, you can just sort of set up just the people you want to follow most closely, and not all those people you friended who you aren't even sure who they are anymore. So I would encourage you, once you've set the priorities and know the couple things you want to do well, take advantage of the technology tools that help you filter for those things and for those audiences. But last thing is, you do have to commit some time to this. A lot of people talk about how great it is because it's all free. But at least in my life, my time isn't free, and my time is incredibly precious. In fact, it's the most precious thing I have. So if you're spending your most precious resource, which is your time, and you've got a lot to do if you work in a nonprofit organization, I do, and I wear about 10 hats. I'm sure you do too. So you are going to have to commit time if you do this. Any of it means time. So bite off the amount you can chew. Take on what you can do well.
Yeah, and I think it's important to set expectations. So when you start a Twitter account, you don't want to tweet 25 times the first day, and then, 25 times the second day, and then the third day once.
Right.
Because people...
I think I've done that sometimes.
There are natural ebbs and flows, but I think when you get started, especially, you want to think about what you can really do. The same with a blog.
Absolutely.
If you only feel like you're going to have time to blog once a week, then put up a post every Tuesday.
Yeah.
And people will know that you're going to post something new on Tuesday. But don't start by, for the first 2 weeks, having a post every single day, so people come to expect that and then have to drop off.
That's a great point. And that leads me to another important thing to remember here. And that is, if you don't have the time to build or create something, that's okay. Go engage with something that's already been built or created. We all talk about field of dreams syndrome. If you build it, will they come? And now we're forgetting, we sometimes say, if you build it, you are dumb. Because if you don't have the time to do this, you might not want to start something. Is the best thing to do to start a blog, or to find 3 bloggers with huge followings who will occasionally talk about you? I might go for the latter approach if I was short on time. Blogging takes a huge amount of energy. I've done it for a couple of years. It takes enormous amounts of resources and energy. So you may be better off engaging with bloggers. You may be better off finding the community that's already been set up on Facebook, causes on Facebook. And you can now set up their great tools. You can go in for your nonprofit and manage those communities. There may be communities that have already been set up that solve your problem. You may or may not need to set up your official page. So do figure out what's already out there. And then the last thing is, don't neglect the basics. So one of the things that at Network for Good we're always telling nonprofits is, social media is great, but if you don't have a way to collect donations on your website, if you don't have a way to email supporters, you shouldn't be doing social media yet. You need to get the basics covered and then start experimenting on a scale that you can achieve. And set some, really easy, achievable, small, clear goals that you can measure your progress against and learn from.
That's great advice. I think we're almost out of time, but I want to ask one more question and then give you a couple of minutes to give final thoughts if you have any. I got an email question, which was, I am the webmaster for a small nonprofit organization and have hesitated to dig into this extra social media like Facebook and Twitter. It seems like people are too busy to continue to dedicate their time to email, Facebook, Twitter, all the other social media platforms. So my question is social media a fad that will die in the near future? I feel like this is maybe a hopeful question.
We'll just go away. Right.
But I've heard people say, social media, it's a fad for right now. It's not going to continue What are your thoughts on that and the future of social media? Is it just something people are into now, or is it here to stay?
It's a great question. Okay, so here's the deal, in my opinion.
Okay.
You can get 100 opinions on this. Don't throw away your postal meter. Don't stop emailing. It's still the most effective way to raise money online. Okay. Add social media to your arsenal because it's really important as a listening tool. It's like one big focus group out there. It's really important as a means to engage people who will be donors down the road if they're not already. But it is one piece of a bigger picture. And it's the newest piece, and we're still learning all the time. So you don't want to neglect all those basic old-fashioned things. Even email is considered old-fashioned now. I've heard it called new old media just today. You want to keep doing those things because they work well. And you don't want to get so carried away with the growth in social media that you neglect those things, because that's still where most of your fundraising dollars are going to come from. Is social media fab? Absolutely not. But in 5 years, there may not be some of the same tools. They may look entirely differently.
The tools may change.
The tools may change. Here's what's not going to change, and this applies to direct mail, and this applies to telemarketing, and that's that our relationship with donors has been forever changed. And social media is not a fad in that the way people expect to engage with each other, with institutions in our society, the expectations they have of marketing. In fact, marketing is becoming more and more about conversation, and traditional marketing will be dead. That is changing forever. And I can't tell you if Twitter will be here in 5 years, but I can tell you that your donors will expect to have a conversation with you in 5 years. And there may be a different, newfangled technological tool to do that, but they're going to expect that. And that's going to apply to everything you do. You're going to have to take another approach to direct mail. You're going to have to be really careful in your direct mail to make people feel they're engaged in a conversation. There's a new generation of donors and supporters who expect that. And they aren't just going to blindly write checks and not expect to hear where the money went, to not feel like a participant in your organization. None of that is going away. And the better you do at grasping that now and reacting to that now, the better positioned you are going to be for the future, whatever technological innovation is going to bring. But focus on focus on the relationship with the donor and how that's evolving, because that's going to continue to evolve, and we are going to be scrambling to keep up, but it's really important that we do. And if you look at what organizations are growing now, it's not some of the big conventional organizations. It's things like Kiva, it's things like Donor Choose, which have rewritten the book on how to engage with supporters.
That's right. I think that's actually a great point to end on the future of social media. And whether or not you have to get on board.
Afraid so,
Sounds like
but
you do.
on a scale you can handle.
That makes sense. And I want to thank you so much for joining us for this hour. We had a lot of great advice. And again, that'll be up on video in the next 30 minutes or so. We'll have the recording up on our website. And we'll also have the transcript available later this week. So if you missed something at the beginning of the session, you should definitely come back and look at it, because Katya had some great advice for nonprofits interested in getting into social media. Also, I want to remind everyone to take the survey. It's just a couple quick questions, and you'll be entered to win a $250 gift card, good card for your favorite nonprofit, and a flip cam for you. So everyone wins. And also, we will be back on Thursday, every Tuesday and Thursday for this month. And this Thursday, Gear Up for Giving, Ask the Gurus will be on the road. My colleague Carrie Saratovsky will be in New York with Allison Fine, who is an activist and blogger. Her blog, A Fine Blog,
Very good.
Great. So that will be wonderful, and please come back and join us for that. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.